Manchester City have beaten Arsenal 4-1 today in what could have been the Premier League title decider. So we've brought an Arsenal fan on, Adam, back to the channel, second shooter straight appearance. And I wanted to ask you, what was your take on this match as an Arsenal fan?
Um, I'm rocking the Arsenal jersey today. I don't know how much pride I'm walking it with today, but to be honest, from the very first whistle, you could tell who the better team was. Man City created chances right from the get go. They could have had a penalty at the very start. That was a controversial call. And then once the De Bruyne goal went in, I think all of our players' heads went down if they weren't already down. Like I remember before watching them in that team huddle, it didn't even look like anyone was talking. It didn't look like they knew who wanted to say what. Like it felt like the players' heads were down from the very start.
Mm-hmm.
And Manchester City were just better in every single way. Arsenal couldn't get a sniff in the entire first half. Like I don't think we even had a shot inside the box. Like the only real shot we had was Thomas Partey's shot from outside the box. And then the second half, Man City, we kind of got a bit more of a foothold in the game. I don't know how much of that was just Man City taking their foot off the gas, and how much of that was Arteta's subs in the second half, bringing on Jorginho and Trossard. Trossard, who probably should have started the game, and Jorginho, who I also would have started Jorginho in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking after this match. Was just that we just got outplayed from start to finish.
Mm-hmm. So they're just quite simply the better team. And to
They were.
reiterate that, I agree. I mean, to me, is anybody really surprised by this result? I mean, to me, it's just clear as day, even coming into this match, that Man City were just the better team. And then after watching this match, it's just clear as day. It's apparent. It doesn't, I mean, Stevie Wonder could tell that Man City are just the better team. And it's just what it comes down to. I mean, quite simply, Arsenal, they've done well this season. And I don't mean this as a disrespect to them, but Man City, I think they're the best team in the world right now. I think there's a reason why they're going to go on to win the Champions League. And right now, City are playing their best football at the best point in the season, at the most crucial point in the season. While Arsenal, they're playing their worst football of the season at the most crucial point in the season. It's the worst possible time to be playing this bad. And obviously, I think that there's a lot of factors for that. Obviously, bad injuries, coming at the wrong time. I mean, you never want to lose Saliba, but especially not this point in the season. So I just think when you combine all of these factors, Arsenal were never going to win this game. Obviously, I think even the most hopeful Arsenal fan deep down knew that they were going to lose this game. City are just the better team. They're playing better. They're on better form right now. Everything was pointing for a City win, and that's exactly what happened. So I'm not surprised by this, and I really don't think anyone else should be either.
I mean, I tried my absolute hardest to believe and will this into reality, but now, you know, hindsight's 2020. There was never a chance, realistically. I mean, it was just almost a bull-faced lie. I almost came on here and lied to Arsenal fans that they could win 1-0 because after this performance, man, I mean, it just looked utterly impossible, man. It's just, City from the get-go, from as soon as they say go, they were all over Arsenal. Like you said before, they could have had a penalty within the first 10 minutes, and really they cut down Arsenal to almost have no chances. Saka very quiet, Gabriel Jesus non-existent, Martinelli did he even show up in the stadium? I don't even know if he was there. It was unbelievable, and like you said, the only really proper chance they had was other than when they scored was the Thomas Partey shot from outside the box within the first half, and that just summed it up. That City just came into this game in full, just oozing confidence, and they've caught fire. I mean, they do look like one of the best teams in the world right now. But this was the decider, the nail in the coffin, and I didn't want to hop off the Arsenal train, but I mean, it's just the train's crashed. I mean, there's no more rails. It's over.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say, and I'm pretty sure I'll get Adam's perspective on this, but this was not the deciding factor in Arsenal losing the title in my mind. And anyone that says that this is the nail in the coffin, yes, but this is not the reason that they lost the title. They lost the title when they blew it to West Ham and then blew it to Southampton. That's when they really lost the title, because at that point, City had it in their control. I always expected City to win this game. And if Arsenal had any chance at winning the title, they had to win those games. You couldn't come into this game forcing yourself to win at the Etihad, and that's what they did. And obviously, it was never going to end well. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, we should have been coming into this game 9 points clear, even with the 2 games more played that we would have had. Like, even if we lost this game, we would have been 6 points clear, which it technically wouldn't still have been in our hands, but it would have been more winnable from that point. But now we're only 2 points clear. They have 2 games in hand. They can even lose a game and still have it in their hands now. And I have been a big defender of Arteta at the club. Even before, like, when we were finishing 8th, I said Arteta deserves time. Honestly, for me, these last few games, Arteta has to take a lot of blame. Yes, you can't prepare for Saliba and Tomiyasu both getting injured in the same game against Sporting Lisbon. But you know that Rob Holding is not good enough. You've seen it. Like, you didn't need these last 4 games to prove that to you. So for him to not drop Holding and try and come up with just something different, to me, is a big reason why we have been bad in these last 4 games. And like, everyone's been piling on Holding ever since, and then also rival fans at the beginning making me like, oh, why are they blaming Holding so much? I mean, Holding's not good enough, but Arteta needs to come up with something different. That's why I would have started Jorginho. I really think that Partey can play the right back role and put Ben White into center back, but I just don't think Arteta wanted to really change anything. He just wanted to make a like for like switch, which Holding for Saliba is not like for like. Like, it's center back for center back, but you're not getting this even close to the same player.
Yeah, well, that's like trading in a Ferrari for a Chevy. You know what I mean? It's just not the same. I mean, and obviously, I wanted to ask you this question because obviously, as an Arsenal fan, obviously this isn't the words that anyone wants to hear right now from an Arsenal perspective, but you have clinched Champions League football, even though you lost this game. So next season, you've got Champions League football. Ultimately, I think if you told Arsenal fans coming into the season that you were going to secure top 4, you would have seen that as a major success. But obviously, knowing what you know now, you bottled the league essentially. Do you see this season in some ways as a failure?
It's tough to say failure because it's like, what do you define failure as the expectations before the season started, or did these expectations change throughout the season, and what becomes success or failure change? Now, winning the league would have been obviously a huge success, and not winning the league would have been a disappointment. To lose it in the fashion that we have, I would say that these last few games have been a failure from Arsenal from the entire season's perspective. I don't think it's a failure. I just think it's a very disappointment to see like but we have made significant progress this season. I think that we're overall a much better team than we were last season. We're able to control games much better than what we were. And I just think like nerves got to the players. I think that they weren't ready for the moment. And yeah, so I would classify it as a disappointment. I don't know if I would go as far as to say failure.
What do you think, G?
I'm still siding with, I think it's a failure, just from the fact that how they went about bottling it. Just because, you're right there at the precipice. You have so many points clear of City. I think you find yourself in that situation. If this was totally different to where, maybe they're sitting more in a United, let's just flip it. They're having like more of a United season and they had that season they had before. You look at that as a success. They get back in the top 4. But the fact that Arsenal was able to play up and be holding of that top position for so long and just to lose it within the last couple games, I mean, it's almost an all-time bottle. Like we had me and Zach had a talk that we're thinking about, who's bottled the league more, and the first one that came to my mind was like the Gerrard slip, but this one was even more because it's a multitude of games in a row that they've dropped points. I mean, multiple draws, and then this is the ultimate nail in the coffin, losing the City. You find yourself right there. You have to get the job done. I mean, it's right there. So, but maybe that's just more of I'm looking at purely more as you're in there. You got to win it now, and the fact that where was Arsenal at last season? They were nowhere near this, so they're happy to have Champions League football. But I think just for the fact that after a successful season, you shouldn't feel disappointed, in my opinion, because if you're having that feeling, oh, this is disappointing, then what's successful from disappointment? That's like two different things. That's just from how I see it.
Yeah, I see. I kind of see both of y'all's perspective. I would say that obviously, if you're looking at it from the very beginning of the season, if you told Arsenal fans that they were going to finish in the top four, or even just finish second, obviously that's in the top four, that's a huge success. You take that. That's a massively successful season. But obviously, I think the goalpost of success moved throughout the season. So obviously, after you basically were 9 points clear with 9 games to go, you have to go on and win the league from that position, and now you're sitting there, with 5 games to go, and you have basically no chance of winning the league unless City just have an epic collapse that we don't see them doing. So I think it honestly depends on how you look at it. Most Arsenal fans, I think, are going to be kind of in that recency bias area to where they're going to see it as a failure because they're not going to look at it from the whole season's perspective. They're not going to remember what they were thinking at the beginning of the season. They're just going to think we were 9 points clear and we bottled it. That's a failure. But
Mhm.
obviously, if you look at it from, you take a step back and you look at it from a wider perspective, this season has been a huge success for Arsenal. You've secured Champions League football. Now you have the ability to go and sign some big name players. And I'm going to ask you about that in a second here. But you can recruit a Declan Rice. You have Champions League football. You can bring in a Caicedo potentially. You can fix the holes in the squad that you have because you have Champions League football. You're going to have extra money because of that. And also, the best players in the world want to play Champions League football. So that's why Arsenal have now put themselves back in the conversation to get some of the best players in the world. So that has to be a success. And obviously, like, we kind of reiterated before, I don't think many people expected Arsenal to be even in this position in the first place. So honestly, it just kind of depends on your personal perspective, how you view it. And for me, I think that this season has to go down as a success for Arsenal, but obviously it's going to feel like a failure, obviously now, because, you bottled the league.
I think my perspective on this could change depending on next year or the year after. If we don't get close to this position again, then we could be looking back on this season as like the one that slipped away.
Yeah.
Like this was our chance. But obviously, we don't know. Right now, it's looking like that we are on the trajectory that we could be competing in this position again next year and the year after. But this sport so much changes. And you can't just guarantee that. Like everyone before the season would have had it nailed on Man City, Liverpool, top two. I don't think anyone thought anything different. And then Liverpool has some injuries, and now they're in like eighth. Like that could
Yeah.
happen to Arsenal, but that's not anything. But you can't really predict that.
Yeah,
So-
because I mean,
Yeah.
well, sorry,
You
before
go,
to cut you off,
No,
but
you go.
it does fully depend on who Arsenal sign, because I mean they're not known as a club that likes to spend the big bucks, but they're gonna have to, because that was another thing that played into why I thought it was a failure, just because we don't know if Arsenal will be back at this position playing as well as they have, because I mean, as soon as like you look back, I mean, there's not a lot of world class players at Arsenal right now. I mean, a lot of these players were just playing out of their skin. Like Xhaka had a resurgence. Thomas Partey had a pretty good start of the season. Obviously, Saka's he's right there. Some people have him world class. I still have him there on the precipice. But we don't. This could all fall apart because let's say Saka picks up a knock. You don't make any really major signings, and I mean Odegaard kind of fell back to the norm of being not. I mean, some people even had him winning the best player. What was it? Best player of the season. I mean, he's complete. He looks nothing like the player that was. So it's going to be definitely telling on who Arsenal sign, because if they're going to be fully relying on or have as great as a season as they had, this one right now, that's going to be hard to expect from a lot of players that don't really have that track record.
So yeah, obviously you just kind of spoke on that a little bit, but I wanted to ask you, do you think Arsenal will be back in this position next season? Do you think they will be competing for the title again next season?
Now, I think that all of the signs, like based on our trajectory, the age of the squad, says that we should be back in this position next season. Now, obviously, freak things can happen, injuries, all that. That's nothing that I can predict. So obviously, that stuff happens. That completely changes. But based on what I've been hearing, it sounds like we are prepared to spend big in the summer. And if we do sign the right players, I see no reason why we can't be back in this position next season. And obviously, Liverpool will probably improve. Who, if Man United will probably be better. I don't know about Chelsea, but
Not
I,
Chelsea.
I think Liverpool and Man United are the two main teams that I can see, and maybe Newcastle. Newcastle have gotten themselves in that too. Now Newcastle haven't really shown like the big spending yet, but it can. But they
Season to
they
come, especially
definitely
that
can.
they might secure Champions League football.
Yeah.
I mean, God knows. God willing.
Yeah, what they could do. Look, I mean, I see your point. I kind of am of the feeling that this was Arsenal's chance. Not to say that they can't compete for the title next season, but this was their 100% chance to actually win it. Because next season, Man City aren't going anywhere. Liverpool are going to get better, like you said. Man United are going to get better. If Newcastle really do secure top 4 and they're able to, get Champions League football, I think they're going to spend a lot of money in the summer, and that's going to allow them to bring in some world-class players. They might even be competing, in that conversation. I don't think they're going to win the league, of course, but they're going to be in that conversation to be, one of the best sides in the Prem. So this was Arsenal's chance to, win the title. Not to say that they can't do it next season, but it's going to be much more difficult, I think, next season because we've seen a lot of those, bigger clubs that you expect to be in the conversation, not in the conversation. Liverpool, they fell off. Chelsea, this is the worst Chelsea team that I've ever seen in my life. So, Arsenal, you were 9 points clear. You had to go on and win it from this position. Sure, Arsenal can compete next season, but I don't know if they are ever going to be in this position 9 points clear with 9 games to go again. I don't know if that's going to be the case. That's a very tough ask. I mean, a lot had to go right for them to be in that position this season. And Man City at the beginning of the season, they weren't clicking like, we kind of thought they would. It took them a little bit of time. Now they're finally playing their best football. But at the beginning of the season, they weren't. Arsenal took advantage of that. They were able to build up that lead. Who's to say that next season, Man City aren't going to start the season the way that they're finishing it now? Then no one's going to catch them. They might go unbeaten. They might pull the Arsenal invincible.
It
God.
might have been the last chance for any team besides City to win the league.
Well, yeah. I mean, because I think City, they honestly are probably going to get better. I mean, before they get worse, they're going to get better. I mean, Haaland is only improving, and they're going to continue to make key signings. I think, they're probably going to lose a couple players, but they're going to lose some depth pieces. They'll, replace them. But I think this was Arsenal's chance. Not to say they can't compete, but I think that this was their clear chance, and I'll get G's perspective.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, that this was like almost somewhat compared it. It could be a bad comparison to when Leicester won it because Leicester were there for the taking. It's like that was their only chance. I mean, obviously it's Leicester City and Arsenal completely different, but it's like when you're that close, you got to win it, and they're never going to get to that spot again. But not to say Arsenal won't ever, but like you said, I don't think they're ever going to be 9 points clear with 9 games to go next season.
Yeah. So before we talk a little bit about Man City, before we wrap up this video, I wanted to ask you about potential summer signings because obviously Arsenal have secured Champions League football. They're expected to potentially spend big money in the summer. Who would you like to see Arsenal sign, and what positions do you think need to be addressed?
So before I say, I think that if we get this summer right, I don't see any reason why we can't be in that title conversation next season. Now, who would I sign? I think we need 2 starting midfielders realistically. And David Ornstein said, based on what David Ornstein said, it sounds like the club is thinking the exact same. He said that we're looking at Rice and Caicedo for the 6th spot and Mohamed Kudus and Mason Mount for the 8th spot. Now, I might have wanted both Declan Rice and Caicedo to fill those 2 spots. It doesn't sound like the club. It doesn't sound like from those comments that they're thinking the same way. But the club's all in on Declan Rice. I think we're going to go all out to sign him. As for who else we need to sign, I think we probably do need a striker. Like we just signed Jesus last season. I don't think he's a starting striker or a starter on a title-winning team.
That's kind of funny to say after all the City ones, but I would kind of agree to that.
That's why City had to replace them multiple.
There's a reason they were willing to sell him to us.
Yeah.
And as for defensive depth, we probably do need another center back. I think that Tomiyasu has proven that he's really not reliable in staying fit, and he's a player that we need to stay fit for depth when starters get injured. So I think we need to replace a player like him.
Mm-hmm.
so that when Saliba gets injured, we don't have to insert a Rob Holding into the side.
G.
I mean, I think the only person that should be really on that list is Declan Rice. I mean, Declan Rice is the more, he immediately goes in this team and he's their best midfielder. I think arguably he's the best midfielder over Odegaard, over, obviously he's the only one he's really competing with. But Declan Rice is on the precipice as well of being world class. He's one of the best midfielders in the league, especially at what he does. He's one of the best holding midfielders. He can really control games, and he proved that when he went to play Arsenal. I mean, he was just the best guy running that midfield. And I think it's really going to depend how much Arsenal are going to willing to spend, because I cannot see him really going for anything less than 80 million or 90 million. I mean, he's still a young star. So it's gonna really depend on that asking price and how much Arsenal willing to spend. I mean, what's the most Arsenal has ever spent? Because
Pepe, right?
Yeah,
Pepe, I don't remember how
Pepe
much
at what,
that was
70
78. It was
Probably
close to
something
70,
about-
70, 80, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they might have to break the piggy bank here to get him. So it's gonna really come down to that. And like you said, I do agree they had to get some more depth. They had to sign a couple of depth players to get some backup, because obviously injuries happen. But that's the main one. That's the top of the wish list here.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. Arsenal, they should be willing to spend big this summer. After what we've just seen this season, there should be no reason to pinch a pennies, this summer. They should be backing Arteta to the fullest, and obviously they should be in constant communication with getting players that he wants, players that are going to fit his system. So if Arteta wants Declan Rice, then go sign Declan Rice. I don't care how much it costs. And then obviously I think I agree with Adam. Jesus is a great player. First of all, I don't know if he's that guy to, like you said, can he be a starting striker for a title-winning side? I don't know. And even beyond that, we've seen it this season. He picked up an injury. He is somewhat injury-prone. And when Arsenal lost him, they had to play Nketiah. He wasn't bad, but I just think you need to sign a quality striker. Maybe, a guy that can just play 50-50 with Jesus, it doesn't have to be necessarily, you don't have to go sign a 100 million striker, but somebody
Maybe
who
just
can,
a veteran.
Exactly. Somebody who can, play with Jesus, somebody who can, replace him. But then if Jesus gets injured, he can slot in. He actually is competent. He does a good job. And Nketiah, I don't think he's just not that guy. He just doesn't quite do the same things that Jesus does. And he's just not that good ultimately. And then I kind of agree. You have to get some defensive depth. Ultimately, the injuries to Tomiyasu and Saliba kind of derailed Arsenal's season, and they've had to slot in Rob Holding. They have to get some defensive depth. Do they need to go break the bank and get a 100% starter? I don't think so. I just think they need to get a reliable player that's not Rob Holding. I just think they need to get somebody who can slot in and you trust them. Because ultimately, who's trusting Rob Holding?
He's not good enough.
Now,
but yeah,
I don't know if I haven't fully thought about whether I want the attacking signing to either be a striker per se, or if potentially we would want to go and break that bank on maybe a left winger and try and convert Martinelli to striker. Now, that's something that Arteta has sort of experimented with this season. He hasn't really. But I think it is something that can happen. I think Martinelli's finishing I think he's the best finisher in our team. And I think he can develop the striker instincts. He already has them, really.
Interesting.
He just hasn't shown them much.
I'm not sure about that one now. I don't know if he. Yeah.
I think. I mean, obviously, you have Trossard. I think that was probably the best January signing of any January signing. I think he's the left winger that can obviously he can play anywhere. He's played striker a little bit. He's kind of played everywhere under Arteta. But Martinelli and Trossard, I think those two are good enough for the wing. And I think when I look at the striker position, Jesus, he's good enough, but they just don't have that second guy. Or maybe you move Jesus to the second guy and you get the starter. But you know what I mean, though? They have to get a good second striker or a good first striker and make Jesus the second striker. So, I mean, if maybe Martinelli is a good finisher. I think he's Arsenal's leading goal scorer this season. So he's proven that he can score goals at an elite level. So, I mean, I don't think that's a crazy take per se.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll be a 9. I think he's successful where he is. Why, try and convert him? I think if they're going to move on from Jesus, you go and, you look at what's out there in the field. Obviously, right now it's either, the hottest name, Victor Osimhen, but who doesn't want him? And it's going to be, hard for Arsenal to get in the bidding war because that's not really their MO. to do
Yeah.
that. But
When I
I
think
mean,
Arsenal have bigger problems than going to spend
yeah,
150
yeah,
million on Osimhen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no
yeah,
reason why they
Yes.
should be spending all of their money on him and then missing out on Declan Rice and then running it back with this midfield next season.
yeah.
Because
God
that's
no,
like there's no point in
that's
signing
not good. Yeah,
Osimhen if
that's
you're
not
going to
good.
run it back with this midfield. You know what I mean? But obviously, a lot of conversation about Arsenal, obviously, but Manchester City. I know, G, you had something, and I'm going to just give you the floor.
Look, I'm getting what this game proved to me more was that I think Kevin De Bruyne is the greatest Premier League midfielder of all time. I've never seen a guy take more control of these big games. I mean, we saw him score a screamer at the Emirates, and when they needed him the most. And look, Erling Haaland played well today, but I think when you look at the City team, you have to look more at KDB, the guy who keeps this team working, the guy who basically embodies what Manchester City Pep's system, which is Kevin De Bruyne. I think he's the best player on this the team by far. I think if they go on, like you say, to win the treble, I think KDB has to be on the top of that list. That he's the reason, because that's what KDB. He's the glue. He does everything for this team. I mean, look, he went on and he put on his scoring boost today and got 2 when they needed it the most. This guy is he's box office. I mean, he's just brilliant to watch. And when we're talking about Ballon d'Or, I think KDB needs that need to be really looked at, because look, I still think it's Messi's to lose. I think even if City go on to win the treble, I think it's still Messi because all amount of goal contributions he's had this calendar year. But anybody on City is going to get any Ballon d'Or shots. It's got to be Kevin De Bruyne
Over Haaland?
over Haaland. Yes.
That's kind of crazy, even though, I mean, Haaland just today broke the Premier League all time. You're shaking your head no.
A lot of that has to be thanks to that man.
Disagree with giving KDB the praise over Haaland. Like, I can't overlook how many goals Haaland scored. He's scoring at a rate we've never seen in the Premier League.
Man,
like he just broke Salah's goal record with what? I think they still have 7 games to play.
They still have 7 games, yeah.
He's gonna blow it out of the water when it's all said and done. And look, KDB has been there at Man City. They haven't been winning the Champions League. The reason why I think Man City are their best ever position to win the Champions League is because they finally have that penalty box killer, that finisher in front of goal. This is what Pep City have lacked ever since he joined the club. It's why I don't think they've been winning. It's why I don't think they've won a Champions League under him. And now he has that in Haaland, which that's what you need in the Champions League. You need goal scorers. You need penalty box killers. Like, the Champions League is won in both boxes, right? How you finish in one end and how you defend your penalty box in the other. Man City are infinitely better at that this season than they were even at Pep's best City teams before that.
I'm not completely denying it. I think Erling Haaland's great. I think he's a very good striker. I think he's a top striker. But Haaland doesn't get these numbers without KDB. The same way, I mean, KDB doesn't get his goal without Erling Haaland. But I think if you're giving more percent of why Erling Haaland is flourishing, I mean, it's the City system. I mean, we all knew if City got any of those top strikers, I mean, you put in, let's just say in a vacuum, let's just put Lewandowski or Harry Kane into this City team, he does the same thing. I full-heartedly think they scored the same amount of goals because this system is just so prone to those easy chances. They give Haaland these great chances, great looks. And a lot of that is led by Kevin De Bruyne. And yes, Kevin De Bruyne has been here. He's been building up his resume as that guy. And I think the only argument we're even having here is, who gets more of the credit of City's success. But I think it's more to do with Kevin De Bruyne because, look, if Kevin De Bruyne is not in this team, Erling Haaland doesn't get as many goals as he does. And I don't think Man City is as good as they would be without him. And the same could be said if you take out Haaland, because obviously they're 2 of their best players. It's 1 and 2. It's very close, but I'm edging it out to De Bruyne just because I just think from the eye, he's more skilled as a player. He's just better. Because, Haaland has better numbers, but I'm looking at purely as who's a better footballer. And that is Kevin De Bruyne.
I mean, I think they both help each other. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne is having one of his best seasons because of the addition of Erling Haaland. He's leading Europe in the most assists this season. He has more than Messi. I mean, that's no slouch. I mean, obviously, you have more assists than Messi. I think the greatest playmaker of all time. That means something. But then also, Haaland is probably having the greatest season a Premier League striker's ever had. And I think a lot of that is not only because of how good he is as a player, but because of Kevin De Bruyne. I mean, how many chances of Kevin De Bruyne just giving Erling Haaland on a silver platter. So I think honestly they just kind of complement each other. And who deserves more credit? I don't know. I think honestly they both deserve equal amount of credit. I know that's a lame answer to say, but I think they both deserve the same amount of credit because you can't look. De Bruyne when he had Gabriel Jesus, he wasn't doing this, and Haaland before he had De Bruyne was not doing this. So they needed each other. It's like a match made in heaven, in my opinion. I think they both
Well,
just needed each other.
I agree with that, but at the end of the day, only the Ballon d'Or only goes to one person. There's no sharing a Ballon d'Or, but obviously I still think it's messy. But Man City could go on and win the treble. I don't think they're going to do it because Real Madrid are going to knock them out. But if they do somehow go in a fairy tale land, a City player is going to have to be looked at for Ballon d'Or. And I think the masses are going to say Haaland just because of his numbers, but just from watching the games and especially in the most important moments, Kevin De Bruyne is always that guy. And yeah, Haaland scored today. He got 2 assists, but I think it's more of Erling Haaland, or more of fucking Kevin De Bruyne.
Look, and you mentioned Haaland getting 2 assists today. And I wanted to make this point because today I think was one of the most complete performances I've ever seen from Erling Haaland, especially this season in a Manchester City shirt. What we saw today was Haaland not just being the poacher that we know he can be. He actually linked up the play. He was able to actually contribute more so than I think I've seen him contribute this entire season. And I kind of want to make this point that if Haaland stays with Pep Guardiola and this Manchester City team for the long term, this is going to be scary because I think he's only getting better, obviously. We already know how good of a finisher he is. But under Pep, with this system, he's only going to get better at the other things. And I'm not going to say that he's going to become as good as Harry Kane, for example, at playmaking. But if he can just get a little bit better, if he can be like this, what I saw today consistently, it's going to be scary because like he already has the goal scoring wrapped up. He's already broken the record. He's going to smash the record now. I mean, I think he's going to go for 40 in the Premier League this season, which is unheard of. Even when it was a 42 game season, that's unheard of. So he just has to develop the rest of his game. And I think we're starting to finally see his game develop. And I think next season, we're going to see an even better version of Erling Haaland. And then the season after that, we're going to see an even better version of Erling Haaland. So the fact that what he's doing right now is already incredible. But I think next season and beyond is going to be even better. So it's just almost unbelievable to a certain extent.
I mean, I somewhat a little disagree with that. I think next season Erling Haaland won't be as great, but we'll only see as time. We'll only see what time goes. I mean, we'll see. We'll have to see.
So I guess any final points that either of y'all wanted to get off your chest here?
I think that's it for me.
I think one thing I will say is if Arsenal do want to be in this position next year, Arteta needs to get better at adapting when certain players get injured. I already touched on it with the Saliba and Tomiyasu injuries. Look, the solution that I propose is a makeshift solution, but he still needs to show that he can come up with solutions when players get injured that are not just plug in a very clearly not good enough player. And he needs to get better at managing throughout the season because, look, for all intents and purposes, we played a second team in the Europa League. We're not going to be able to do that in the Champions League. We played second teams in the cup competitions. We're going to be able to do that next season, but like, are fans going to be down with that again? Like, just not trying to win the cups. So as much as I have defended and as how good I think Arteta is, I think he still needs to show that he can be more adaptable in certain situations, which I think he can be.
But I think maybe you would agree with this, but I think some of it comes down to the fact that, let's just compare it to Manchester City, for example. Arsenal's depth is just nowhere near Man City's.
Jesus.
So obviously, I think part of it, I think deep down Arteta has to know that holding isn't good enough. But I mean, it's kind of just like, what other choice does he have? Besides potentially playing a makeshift solution that's playing a player out of position, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I mean, like, let's just say they did what you were saying and put Thomas Partey at right back and put Ben White at center back. If it didn't work, then Arteta
that's horrible. Yeah,
it's going to get so much more criticism than than what he did putting just Rob Holding in there.
Yes, I agree. I think that's one thing though that separates Pep from pretty much every other manager. He's very good at creating those makeshift solutions, even with
I agree with
because
that.
Man City's depth isn't as good. Like they do not have 2 starting 11s.
Uh,
I will say that they have some really good depth in certain areas, but I don't think they have 2 starting 11s.
I mean, I have to look at it again, but I think they do. I mean, even today, I mean, Nathan Ake picked up an injury and
The
says,
injury
"Oh
was
well,
there.
we'll just put in Kyle Walker." What?
Yeah.
Kyle Walker in front. I mean, Kyle Walker isn't even starting anymore. I mean, this depth is crazy. And obviously, we all know Riyad Mahrez. Riyad Mahrez scored a hat trick in the FA Cup,
Yeah.
and he didn't even start today. I mean, and Phil Foden came off the bench. Like, it's a bit ridiculous, man. Like,
They do have some,
And
and
make-
Julian Alvarez as well.
Julian Alvarez, like, look, I think this City team have at least enough to make a second 11 that can compete in the Premier League. Not probably, not make top 4 or top 5 or anything, but definitely beat some of these, maybe beat a Chelsea there, But I think
Not hard.
it's a team that's good enough to
Yeah, not-
be recognized.
I see what you're saying, and I do agree that Arteta does need to potentially work on that, but I think it will get better as potentially Arsenal improve the squad, because I think, like we've talked about, they are going to improve the squad. They're going to make some key signings. They're going to make some depth signings and signings that, because look, like I agree with your point. You can't play second teams in the Champions League. You know what I mean? And I'm sure Arsenal fans are going to want, potentially some kind of trophy next season. And so you're not going to get away with playing second 11s in the FA Cup, for example, and then you go out in the 4th round, and then you're putting all your eggs in the Premier League basket, which is always going to be very difficult to win. So I think it just comes down to what the board does, what transfers are brought in, and then maybe we'll get to see Arteta work on that more so.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on Edu this summer. A lot of fans were not happy with him after the January transfer window, even after signing Trossard, saying that he's a penny pincher and we always lose out on these big deals. This is his summer to prove them wrong. Right. And he has to.
Yeah. Well, I agree. He has to. I mean, there's no reason not to. I mean, if you're pinching pennies after this Arsenal season, then what are you going to do if they do any worse? You know what I mean? Like, you have to back Arteta now. There's no reason not to, in my opinion. I know G agrees with that.
Yeah.
So, look, I mean, obviously disappointing day for Adam, but, you made Champions League football, so I guess it could be worse,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely what
you
I was
could be
thinking
11th
about.
place right now.
That
You
I
could
could
be.
I could.
You could be. I'm the only one here that knows how it feels to be in 11th place. So I'll tell you. I'll tell you how
Arsenal were like not far from there a couple years ago.
I'll tell you how it feels to be in 11th
Don't
place. It
throw
doesn't
him that
feel good.
lifeline.
It doesn't feel good. So look, you're gonna have to.
You
let
have
us know.
11 in your name.
I didn't even notice that.
Yes.
But y'all gonna
You
have to let us know in the
predicted it,
comments
bro.
down below what y'all thought of this match. What do you think of Arsenal? What do you think of potential signings? Let us know everything we talked about in the comments down below. Let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video. But I think without further ado, we can get out of here.
Let's go.
So I'm Zach,
I'm G.
And I'm Adam.
and we'll see you next time for another video. Peace.